My husband Ryan struck me in the middle of a charity gala. His mother leaned close to my ear and whispered, "No one will help you." At that exact moment, I heard police sirens outside. The ballroom doors opened. Officers walked in. I lifted my eyes. Froze. And instead of crying, I straightened my back and looked directly at them. Who called the police? And why did they arrive right then? I'm glad you're here. If this story caught your attention, stay with me. Like, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from. Because what happened next didn't just change my marriage, it changed my entire life. That day, I had no idea everything was about to fall apart. The gala was held in downtown Austin, inside a historic hotel where crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls from ceilings painted in soft gold. The carpet was thick enough to swallow the sound of footsteps. A live jazz trio played near the balcony, the trumpet low and warm, the piano steady as a heartbeat. Champagne glasses clinked in gentle rhythm, and waiters floated between guests with silver trays balanced effortlessly on white-gloved hands. I had just been promoted to chief financial officer of one of the largest development firms in the region. 23 years of work had led to that title. 23 years of early mornings, of reviewing contracts at the kitchen table while my coffee went cold, of staying composed in rooms full of men who mistook calm for weakness. That night was meant to celebrate discipline, loyalty, endurance. Ryan was smiling beside me. He had one arm around my waist, holding me just tightly enough for photographs. His suit was tailored perfectly. His cufflinks caught the chandelier light every time he raised his glass. From the outside, we looked like a power couple. Balanced. United. His mother, Linda, was hugging me as guests passed. "We're so proud of her," she kept saying, her voice warm and theatrical. "She's worked so hard." Colleagues congratulated me. A junior analyst nearly cried when she told me I had inspired her. My CEO kissed my cheek and whispered that the board had never been so unanimous about a decision. I believed, foolishly, that something had shifted. For years I had tried to shrink myself at home so Ryan would not feel diminished by my success. I downplayed bonuses. I softened achievements. I laughed at jokes that reduced me. I convinced myself that compromise was maturity. That night, under those chandeliers, I thought I had finally earned respect. I remember the small details. Ryan emptying his champagne too quickly and signaling for another before the waiter even turned away. Linda watching me when others spoke about my promotion, her smile fixed but her eyes calculating. My phone vibrating in my clutch from an unknown number. I glanced at the screen. No name. Just digits. I silenced it. At the time, those things felt insignificant. Harmless background noise to a triumphant evening. I did not know that within 20 minutes, I would be lying on a marble floor with blood at the corner of my mouth. The moment danger first flickered was disguised as praise. My CEO raised his glass and said, lightly, kindly, "Ryan, you're a lucky man. Not many husbands can say they're married to the most brilliant financial mind in the room." There was laughter. Applause. I felt Ryan's arm tighten around me. Too tight. His jaw shifted. A small muscle near his temple pulsed. I knew that look. I had seen it in quieter settings, in our kitchen when I corrected him gently, in the car when I refused to cancel a meeting, in the bedroom when I declined an argument instead of escalating it. His fingers wrapped around his glass as if it were something fragile he might crush. I leaned closer and whispered, "It's just a compliment." But compliments, I had learned too late, can feel like accusations to insecure men. The music continued. The room glittered. And yet something invisible had already begun to fracture. I remember thinking I should have answered that unknown call. I remember sensing a shift in the air, like the pressure change before a storm. But storms do not announce themselves politely. They arrive when you are still holding your glass. Ryan laughed. Not naturally. Not warmly. It was a thin, brittle sound that did not belong to celebration. It cut across the music like something sharp dragged across glass. "You think so?" he said to my CEO, his tone light but stretched too tight. "Brilliant can be overrated." A few guests chuckled politely. Someone lifted their glass. It was interpreted as humor. A husband teasing his accomplished wife. I knew better. His hand slipped from my waist. The warmth disappeared instantly, leaving a cold outline where he had been holding me. He stepped half a pace away and adjusted his cufflinks with deliberate precision. That small, meticulous movement, straightening fabric, aligning metal, had always been his signal. It meant something inside him was misaligned. My CEO smiled awkwardly and excused himself toward another group. The applause dissolved. The jazz trio resumed. But the temperature around us shifted. "Did you enjoy that?" Ryan asked quietly, eyes fixed on the stage rather than me. "Enjoy what?" I kept my voice calm. Measured. The way I had learned to speak at home. The performance. "It wasn't a performance," I said. "It was a promotion." He turned his head then. Slowly. Deliberately. "Same thing." Linda appeared at his shoulder as if she had sensed the disturbance in the air. She had always possessed that talent, arriving precisely when the ground beneath me began to tremble. "Everything all right?" she asked, her voice dipped in honey. "Of course," I answered before Ryan could. He inhaled sharply. "That's the problem," he murmured. "You always answer first." Linda's fingers brushed his sleeve. A silent reinforcement. An alignment. I suddenly saw it clearly, they did not simply share blood. They shared perspective. The band shifted to a slower song. Couples drifted toward the marble dance floor, the lights dimming slightly to soften the room. "Dance with me," Ryan said. It was not a request. I placed my glass down carefully and followed him. The marble beneath our feet reflected the chandeliers above, turning the floor into a mirrored illusion. We stepped into the center. His hand landed on my back, fingers pressing with a firmness that bordered on force. "You embarrassed me," he said through a smile that could have passed for affectionate from a distance. "I did nothing," I replied softly. "I stood there." "You stood there like you were above me." The accusation was absurd. And yet it was familiar. Success, to him, had always been a subtraction. If I rose, he felt diminished. "I have spent years making sure you never felt small," I said quietly. "That's exactly it," he snapped under his breath. "You make sure of everything." We rotated slowly. Applause from another table drifted across the room. Camera flashes burst intermittently, capturing what looked like elegance. His grip tightened. "You couldn't just say thank you and move on," he continued. "You had to soak it in." I said nothing. "That's worse." His jaw was rigid. I could see the muscle pulsing again near his temple. A warning I had ignored too many times in private settings. The music swelled toward its end. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. "You forget who you are without me." The words landed heavier than they should have. I felt something inside me begin to fracture, not loudly, but with a quiet internal crack. The song ended. Polite applause. And then time split open. His hand left my back. There is a second, a suspended, weightless second, when the body recognizes what the mind still refuses to accept. I saw the movement. I saw his shoulders shift. I saw his palm rise. I did not believe it would happen. Not here. Not under chandeliers. Not in front of investors and colleagues. But humiliation does not ask permission from location. His hand struck my face. The sound echoed harder than the music ever had. A sharp, unmistakable crack. Gasps replaced melody. My heel slipped against polished marble. My body tilted backward. I reached instinctively for balance, for air, for something solid. There was nothing. I fell. The marble was colder than I expected. Unforgiving. My shoulder hit first, then my hip. The impact forced the air from my lungs. For a moment, I stared upward. The chandelier above me fractured into dozens of blurred shards. Light splintered across my vision. I tasted iron. Warmth spread slowly at the corner of my mouth. The room had gone silent. Not confused. Not chaotic. Silent. As if everyone had collectively decided not to breathe. Ryan stood over me, chest rising quickly. His face was no longer polished. It was exposed, raw, startled by his own action. Linda stepped forward. She did not rush. She did not kneel in concern. She bent slowly, her shadow falling across my face. Her perfume, heavy, floral, filled my lungs. "No one will help you," she whispered. Her voice held no anger. Only certainty. And in that suspended second, before the sirens grew louder, before the doors opened, before anyone moved, I understood something with devastating clarity. This was not an accident. It was not loss of control. It was a message. And it had just been delivered. When I felt the blood gather at the corner of my lip, it wasn't the sting that frightened me. It was the familiarity. My heart began to pound in the same tight, frantic rhythm I thought I had outgrown, like my body had kept its own private calendar of danger, and this sound belonged to an old date I never wanted to remember. I pressed my tongue gently against the split skin, tasting iron, and for a moment I couldn't hear the jazz at all. I could only hear my pulse and the soft scrape of shoes as people shifted away from me, giving me space the way you do around something broken. Fear does something strange. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it simply opens a door in your mind that you have kept locked for years. And suddenly I was not on a marble floor in a ballroom. I was back in a hallway with cheap beige paint and a buzzing fluorescent light that never stopped humming. The air smelled of boiled vegetables and disinfectant. My hand was small in someone else's, my fingers cold, my knuckles white from holding on too tightly. A foster home corridor. I remembered the sound of an ambulance outside, sirens bouncing off the brick walls like frantic birds. I remembered the way the adults spoke in half sentences, careful not to use words that would break a child in two. I remembered one woman's perfume, powdery, tired, leaning over me and saying, "Be brave, sweetheart," as if bravery were something you could simply hand a girl like a blanket. My older brother Alex stood beside me. He was only 16, but his shoulders were already set in a way that made him look older. Our parents were gone, a tragic accident, the papers said, an investigation with no clear answers, the neighbors whispered. I remember the funeral flowers wilting too fast. I remember the closed casket. I remember how Alex didn't cry in public. He held his grief like a weapon, tucked close, sharp and private. That night in the hallway, he bent down until his mouth was near my ear. "I will always protect you," he whispered. It wasn't a promise made to comfort me. It was a vow made to himself. After that, Alex became my entire world. He learned to drive early. He learned to read people faster than I could. He grew into the kind of man who could walk into a room and change its temperature without raising his voice. Teachers said he was mature. Social workers said he was intense. I only knew that when he looked at someone too long, they tended to look away first. When I earned scholarships, Alex attended every ceremony, standing at the back with his arms folded, I scanning the crowd like he was counting exits. When I started my first job, he asked what time I left the office and what route I took home. He never told me what he did for money in those early years, only that he handled things. And somehow, things were handled. When Ryan came into my life, Alex's silence was the first red flag I ignored. Ryan was charming then. Confident. The kind of man who listened with his whole face, as if every word I said mattered. He brought flowers to my office. He remembered the names of my colleagues. He opened doors, pulled out chairs, kissed my knuckles like we were in an old movie. Alex met him once. Just once. They shook hands. Ryan smiled too widely. Alex did not smile at all. Later, when Ryan went to the restroom, Alex leaned toward me and asked, calmly, "Do you feel safe with him?" The question irritated me. I remember that, my own defensiveness, like a teenager. I told him he was being overprotective. I told him I was an adult. I told him he couldn't interrogate every man who cared about me. Alex didn't argue. He only said, "Call me if you ever need to." For years, I told myself Alex was wrong. I told myself he didn't understand marriage, compromise, the small negotiations of daily life. I told myself he saw threats everywhere because of what we'd survived. And maybe he did. But as I lay on that marble floor, watching the ballroom doors open and police officers step inside, I felt an old truth settle in my bones with quiet weight. Alex had never stopped scanning the room. He had never stopped counting exits. He had never stopped preparing for the moment I would finally admit I needed help. The sirens I heard outside the hotel did not sound like embarrassment. They sounded like arrival. And as the officers walked toward us, faces steady, hands near their belts, I realized that my mother-in-law's whisper had been wrong. Someone was helping me. Someone had called. And whoever it was had timed it perfectly. When I first met Ryan, he was the kind of man people describe as solid. Not flashy. Not loud. The sort who held eye contact a second longer than necessary, as if he was learning the shape of your thoughts. He brought me coffee exactly how I liked it after our second date, 2 sugars, no lid, because I hated the plastic taste. He asked questions about my work and listened like it mattered. After the foster homes, after the careful years of proving I could stand on my own, that kind of attention felt like safety. But Alex didn't smile. My brother shook Ryan's hand and held it just a fraction too long. Ryan's grin stayed in place, but his eyes sharpened. Later, when Ryan walked away to take a call, Alex leaned toward me and said, very softly, "He performs kindness. Watch what happens when he doesn't get applause." I told myself Alex was biased. Overprotective. Haunted by our past. I told myself he didn't understand what it meant to want something ordinary, someone who would come home, sit at a table, ask how my day was, and make the world feel less sharp. At first, Ryan did all of that. Then the small things arrived, the way termites arrive, quietly, patiently, until one day the floor gives way. It started with clothing. "Don't wear that," he said one morning, his voice casual as he adjusted his tie. "It's too bold." I looked down at my dress. Navy. Professional. Nothing wild. "Bold for who?" I asked. He smiled as if I were being cute. "Men look." "I don't like men looking." It sounded protective. It even sounded romantic if you squinted at it the right way. Then it was my calendar. "Why do you have to go to every networking thing?" he asked. "You're always around those people." "Those people are my colleagues," I said. "You don't need them," he replied, as if he were offering comfort. "You have me." Then it was my salary. When I made director, Ryan insisted we celebrate. He ordered an expensive bottle of wine and toasted me in our kitchen. But later, when the dishes were done and the apartment was quiet, he said, "It's strange, you know." "What is?" "A wife earning more than her husband." I laughed, because I thought it was a joke. He didn't laugh back. "I'm proud of you," he added quickly, like an afterthought, "but people talk. Men don't like feeling secondary." That word, secondary, stuck to me. I began softening my victories. I stopped mentioning raises. I let him pay for dinners he couldn't afford because it made him stand taller. I told myself marriage was a partnership, and partners take turns carrying weight. But Ryan didn't want turns. He wanted control dressed up as concern. Linda's influence threaded through everything like invisible wire. The first time I met her, she kissed my cheek and said, "So pretty." And so serious. She laughed as if it were affectionate, but her eyes were assessing. She asked what neighborhood I grew up in. Where my parents were. What they did. The moment I said I didn't have them, that I was raised in foster care, her face smoothed into something polite and distant. After that, her compliments always had teeth. A career is nice, she'd say at family dinners, passing me potatoes, but a husband comes first. Or, men need to feel needed, dear. Otherwise they wander. She said it like wisdom. Like tradition. Like warning. Ryan loved having her on his side. I could feel it when she praised him, how he grew calmer, steadier, as if her approval fed the part of him that always wanted to be king. And then the neighbors began to notice. One evening, I was taking out the trash when Mrs. Delgado from across the hall paused near her door. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked, her voice quiet. "I heard shouting last night." I smiled too quickly. "I'm fine." I was lying. Because inside our apartment, doors slammed the way thunder does, sudden, violent, meant to remind you who controls the sky. Ryan never hit me in those early years, not with his hands. He hit with tone. With silence. With the way he could turn the room cold simply by deciding I had disappointed him. And each time I tried to explain myself, Linda's voice echoed in my head, "Husband first. Husband first." So I adjusted. I minimized. I apologized for things that weren't wrong. I became careful in my own home. That is what people don't understand about control. It doesn't begin with bruises. It begins with permission. Small permissions you grant to keep peace. Tiny surrenders that feel harmless until you realize you have handed over your entire life one quiet inch at a time. And by the time we reached that gala in downtown Austin, by the time I stood under chandeliers with a new title on my name tag and pride in my chest, Ryan was not meeting a new version of me. He was meeting the version of me I had been trying to hide from him for years. And he could not tolerate her. The officers didn't rush. They moved the way trained people move when they already know the story they're walking into. One of them asked my name. Another asked if I needed medical attention. I heard someone behind me say, "He hit her." We all saw it. Ryan tried to laugh it off, his public laugh, until the taller officer turned to him and said, quietly, "Sir, step away from her." Linda's hand tightened on Ryan's sleeve like a leash. "This is a misunderstanding," she said, voice bright, almost amused. My son would never. But the room had shifted. The spell of chandeliers and champagne had broken. Guests who had smiled at us 10 minutes earlier now stared at Ryan with the kind of discomfort people reserve for messes they don't want on their shoes. "Ma'am," an officer said to me, "do you want to press charges?" I looked up at Ryan. At the red bloom of anger still sitting on his cheekbones. At the way his eyes searched mine, not for my well-being, but for my obedience. And something in me, the careful, trained, accommodating part, went very still. "Yes," I said. "I do." Ryan's mouth opened as if to protest, but the officer was already guiding him away. When the cuffs clicked, a collective breath moved through the ballroom. A sound like relief. Like disbelief. Linda leaned down toward me as I sat on the edge of a chair someone had brought over. Her lips barely moved. "No one will help you," she whispered again, each word crisp with certainty. "You've just ruined yourself." Her threat would have landed deeper if my phone hadn't vibrated again. Same unknown number. This time I answered. "Don't speak," a voice said, male, low, controlled. "Just listen. You're not alone." My throat tightened. "Who is this?" A pause. Then, "Tell the officers to check Ryan's phone and his briefcase. Tell them to look for Clayton. And tell them you have a brother." The call ended. I stared at my screen, my hands suddenly cold. Clayton. The name struck something in my mind, not a memory, but a shadow. I had heard Ryan mention a Mark once or twice, always with that too casual tone men use when they're hiding how important someone is. The paramedics insisted on cleaning my lip. A medic dabbed antiseptic that burned like truth. The officers took statements. Guests pretended not to stare, but they watched anyway, the way people watch a car wreck while insisting they hate violence. By the time Ryan was escorted out, Linda was already arranging her face for the next audience: concerned mother, wronged family, graceful victim of my overreaction. And then the real escalation began. Because the next morning, my name wasn't just in an incident report. It was online. Headlines came fast, written by people who had never met me and didn't care to. Ambitious executive destroys her marriage. Successful wife humiliates struggling husband. Power couple scandal shocks Austin charity scene. Someone had leaked photos from the gala, Ryan's hand midair, my body angled backward, my face caught in the instant before impact. The image was framed in a way that made it look like drama, not violence. Worse, there were new photos too, old ones, pulled from somewhere private. A picture of me and Alex at a fundraiser 2 years earlier. Another of him walking beside me outside my office, his hand on my elbow, guiding me through a crowd. The captions were poisonous: secret relationship? Affair rumor swirl. Who was the mysterious man? I felt sick reading it, not because I cared what strangers believed, but because I recognized intention. Someone wasn't merely gossiping. Someone was trying to destroy me. At work, the board asked for an emergency meeting. My CEO's voice on the phone was cautious, apologetic, frightened of liability. My assistant stopped making eye contact. Even the elevator seemed quieter, as if the building itself was judging. That afternoon, I finally did what I should have done years ago. I called Alex. He answered on the first ring. Are you hurt? I didn't ask how he knew. I just swallowed. They're saying things, I whispered. They're twisting everything. I know, he said. That's why I told you to call if you ever needed to. My stomach clenched. Did you call the police? A pause, small, measured. I made sure help arrived, he said. The rest depends on what you're ready to see. What do you mean? And then he said the name the unknown caller had said. Mark Clayton. The room around me seemed to tilt. Alex continued, calm as stone. Ryan isn't just angry. He's desperate. And desperate men do illegal things with other desperate men. My mouth went dry. Illegal like what? Like moving money that isn't his, Alex said. Like using your access, your position, your reputation, without you realizing. I closed my eyes. In that darkness, a new fear formed. Not the fear of being hit. The fear of being used. A week later, I walked back into that same hotel as if the marble floor had never held my body. The lobby still smelled like lemon polish and money. The same bellman stood near the brass luggage cart. The same chandelier glittered above the staircase as if it had no memory of what it had witnessed. But I remembered. My cheek had faded from purple to yellow, a slow-blooming bruise that made strangers look away. I wore concealer anyway, not to hide it from the world, but to keep it from becoming the only thing they saw. They had scheduled an investor conference in the ballroom. Reassurance, my CEO called it, his voice careful on the phone. Stability. Confidence. The subtext was sharper: we need to prove you're not a liability. I arrived early. I had slept little all week. I had listened to Alex in the quiet hours, while the city outside my windows went on pretending nothing had changed. He didn't tell me everything, he never did. He gave me fragments, names, dates, directions. Enough to follow the thread without handing me a weapon I wasn't ready to hold. And I followed it. My firm had strict controls. Every transfer, every approval, every signature lived somewhere in a system with a timestamp. I knew where to look because I helped design those controls. I knew how people tried to cheat them because I had spent my career catching men who believed rules were for other people. Ryan had assumed I was too busy loving him to notice. Mark Clayton's name appeared like a stain that wouldn't wash out once you saw it. Consulting invoices. Advisory services. Shell entities with polished names and empty offices. Transfers split into smaller amounts, timed around weekends and holidays, built to slip under automatic review thresholds. It was clever. It was also sloppy, because greed always is. The day of the conference, the ballroom filled with investors, journalists, board members, and the kind of men who wore confidence like cologne. Microphones were tested. Projectors warmed up. A photographer adjusted his lens and asked me to stand a little closer to Ryan when we entered, as if proximity could repair what violence had made visible. Ryan arrived with Linda. His face was carefully composed, but his eyes were restless. Linda wore cream silk and pearls, the costume of respectability. When she saw me, her smile brightened too quickly. "There she is," she said loudly. "Our brave girl." I felt my stomach tighten, but my voice stayed calm. "Good morning, Linda." Ryan leaned in as if we were still married in the way people believed. "Don't do anything stupid," he murmured without moving his lips. I met his eyes and said softly, "You already did." The conference began. My CEO spoke first. Then a board member. Then the microphone was offered to me for a brief statement. I walked to the podium in heels that clicked like punctuation on the marble. I looked out at the room. So many faces. So many watches. So many quiet judgments waiting for permission. I took a breath and let it settle in my chest. "My name is," I began, then paused as if reconsidering the entire script they expected. "No," I said, louder. "Before I say anything else, I need to correct what has been circulating." A murmur moved through the crowd. I nodded toward the AV technician. "Play the security footage." Ryan's head snapped slightly. Linda's smile froze. The screen behind me lit up. The ballroom from the gala appeared, same angle, same chandeliers, same polished illusion. Then Ryan's hand rose. The strike. My fall. A collective intake of breath swept the room like wind. Someone near the front whispered, "Oh my God." Ryan stood, chair legs scraping the floor. "This is not." I lifted a hand, not dramatic, just firm. "Sit down," I said. "You've spoken enough." The room went very still. Then I changed the slide. Financial records filled the screen, dates, amounts, account numbers partially redacted, but clear enough to see the pattern. Names appeared: Mark Clayton. Clayton Advisory. Two other entities that were nothing but mailboxes. "These are not rumors," I said. "These are transactions executed through access tied to my household and my position." Ryan's voice rose, too loud now, cracking to polish. "You're doing this to punish me." Linda surged forward. "She's lying. She's unstable, look at her, this is revenge." And then the next slide appeared. Private messages. Timestamped. Ryan's words on a screen, undeniable in their casual ugliness. Instructions. Reassurances. Plans. One line in particular made the room shift again, the way a crowd shifts when it realizes the danger is larger than one slap. Linda's breath caught. Ryan went pale. He looked at the screen like it had betrayed him. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a steady, almost clinical clarity, like a door finally opening onto the truth. When the bank transfers expanded on the screen, larger amounts, routed through a personal account linked to Ryan, someone at the back of the room stood up. Not a guest. An officer. Then another. The same calm, trained movement as the night of the gala. The police entered again, and this time the room did not gasp in surprise. It exhaled, as if it had been waiting. "Ryan Hale," an officer said, voice carrying cleanly through the silence, "you are under arrest." Linda's pearls trembled against her throat as if even they were trying to escape. Ryan's eyes found mine one last time, fear, anger, disbelief. And I simply stood there, hands resting on the podium, steady as stone. The room did not erupt. It did not descend into chaos. It went quiet in the way a forest goes quiet after a tree falls, not because nothing happened, but because everything did. Ryan did not fight when the officers reached him. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, as if the tailored suit no longer fit the man inside it. His shoulders, once so squared with confidence, curved inward. His hands, the same hands that had struck me beneath chandeliers, now rested stiffly at his sides while metal circled his wrists. Linda's voice broke first. "This is absurd," she cried, though the word lacked conviction. "This is a misunderstanding. She's confused. She's under pressure." Her eyes darted across the room, searching for allies. There were none. Investors who had once shaken Ryan's hand now stepped back. Board members who had defended him privately avoided his gaze. The men who prided themselves on instinct recognized something they could not afford to ignore: liability. I stepped away from the podium slowly, deliberately, as if descending from a stage I had never wanted. Ryan's eyes found mine. There was accusation there. Not regret. Not apology. Only the stunned fury of a man who believed exposure was betrayal. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly as an officer guided him forward. I looked at him for a long moment. "You did," I replied. And that was the last full sentence I ever spoke to him as his wife. The doors closed behind them. The sound was softer than I expected. No applause followed. No dramatic confrontation. Just the low hum of people whispering calculations: financial, social, reputational. My CEO approached me slowly, his expression layered with shock and something like relief. "I had no idea," he said. "I know," I answered. Because that was the truth. He hadn't known. Most people hadn't. Abuse wears a suit well. Fraud hides behind spreadsheets easily when the right signature sits in the right place. Linda remained standing near the front row, her hands trembling. For the first time since I had met her, she looked uncertain. She did not approach me. She did not whisper. She simply stared, as if trying to reconcile the woman she believed she could control with the woman standing calmly in front of her. I felt no triumph. That surprised me. For years I had imagined that if I ever stood up fully, without shrinking, without apologizing, it would feel like victory. It did not. It felt like emptiness. 7 years of marriage. 7 years of careful compromise, of adjusting my tone, of measuring my success so it would not bruise his ego. 7 years of dinners where I softened my opinions. Of arguments where I chose silence because peace seemed more important than truth. Gone. Not erased, but exposed as something fragile and hollow. I walked toward the side exit of the ballroom because I suddenly needed air. My heels echoed in the corridor, sharp against stone. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and polished wood, the same scent from the gala night when I lay on the marble floor. The memory flickered, but it no longer tightened my chest. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright and indifferent. Reporters were gathering near the front entrance. Cameras angled upward, hungry. I could hear questions forming before they were shouted. Instead of stepping toward them, I turned the opposite direction. Toward the parking garage. I sat inside my car with the engine off for several minutes. My hands rested on the steering wheel, steady. No shaking. No tears. Just a strange, quiet space inside me where fear used to live. My phone buzzed. "Alex." I answered. "It's done," I said. "I know," he replied. There was no celebration in his voice. No satisfaction. Only confirmation. "Are you safe?" he asked. "Yes." A pause. "You look different when you stand up," he said quietly. I leaned my head back against the seat. "I don't feel different," I admitted. "You will," he said. "Give it time." When I hung up, I realized something small but profound. For the first time in years, I did not feel like a victim of circumstance. I felt like a participant in my own life again. The marriage was over. That truth sat plainly in front of me. But beneath the grief, because there was grief, undeniable and heavy, there was something steadier. Self-respect. Not loud. Not triumphant. Just present. And for the first time since the night under the chandeliers, I breathed without calculating who might be watching. I filed for divorce on a Monday morning, the kind with a pale sky and a thin rain that made the sidewalks look freshly polished. I remember the sound of the courthouse doors, heavy, indifferent, and the smell inside, paper, old coffee, floor wax. I signed where the clerk pointed, not with trembling hands, but with the steady fatigue of a woman finally done pretending. After that, everything became practical. I changed the locks first. Not because I thought Ryan would come back, he was too proud for that, but because my body needed the click of new keys to believe the world had shifted. I installed cameras. I rerouted my mail. I closed the joint accounts and opened new ones under my name alone. Each small task felt like stitching my skin back together, seam by seam. Linda tried once. She left a voicemail that began sweet and ended sharp, as if she couldn't decide which mask would work on me anymore. She spoke about family, about mistakes, about how I was overreacting. She never apologized. She never asked if I was all right. She only mourned what she could no longer control. I deleted it. My company placed me on temporary leave for public attention concerns, but my attorney reminded them, politely, firmly, that facts were facts, and contracts were contracts, and I was not a scandal. I was an employee who had been harmed and then exploited. The board softened once the arrests became public record, once the numbers on paper outweighed the whispers. Still, the strangest part wasn't the legal work or the financial cleanup. It was the silence at night. No slammed cabinets. No cold tension rolling off another person's mood. No careful measuring of my words. I would stand in my kitchen and hear only the refrigerator hum and the soft tick of the clock, and my chest would loosen in small, unfamiliar increments. Alex came by the first week. He didn't arrive with speeches. He came with groceries, a new doorbell camera he insisted was better than the one I bought, and that quiet watchfulness he'd carried since we were children. He walked through my house like he was checking corners, then sat at my table and poured coffee as if this had always been his seat. "You did it," he said finally. "I survived it," I corrected. He looked at me for a long moment. Same thing. I wanted to lean into the comfort of having him near. I wanted to let his presence carry me the way it used to, back when I was a girl gripping his hand in that hallway. But something inside me had changed. I understood, with a clarity that felt almost tender, that Alex could stand beside me, but he could not be my spine. I had to be that now. So I began again. Quietly. Without drama. I went back to work. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I refused to drag the past into my future like a heavy suitcase. I learned what peace felt like in my own body. I learned that safety is not a mood other people grant you. It is a structure you build. And for the first time in years, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't search my face for signs of what I had done wrong. I simply saw myself. Still standing. Still capable. Still here. Sometimes the people who whisper, "No one will help you," are the most afraid that help is already on its way. I used to believe strength meant enduring quietly. I know better now. Strength is not silence. It is clarity. It is the moment you decide that fear will no longer negotiate on your behalf. Ryan's name is now a case number. Linda's voice is an echo that no longer reaches me. And I stand in a life rebuilt not from revenge, but from truth. Some names and details have been changed for safety. Tell me, do you believe the truth always finds its way to the surface? Stay with me for the next story. It may shake you even more.